President Trump now within the margin of error, according to the New York Times Siena College poll you're seeing on your screen. 4 years ago, Biden won the state by more than 10%. Some experts say if Biden cannot hold on to Virginia, however, his path to victory may be slim to none. Here's where things stand right now in some key swing states, according to the latest survey from The Times and Say 24. It found former President Trump holds a lead in the 7 swing states, which include Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Joining us now, NewsNation contributor and veteran political and media strategist Kurt Bardella. What do you make of some of these polls?
Well, the polls really kind of tell the story of what the races look like pretty much the entire time. And what we've been talking about here, it's going to be a close race. It's going to be within the error margin. There are going to be times where sometimes that's the error margin going the way of President Biden. Sometimes it's going to be the way of going towards former President Trump. I think after the combination of the debate, the assassination attempt, heading into the RNC convention, it's not unlikely that Trump will get an even bigger bump over the next 7 to 10 days. That's conventionally what happens after the convention. The party that has their first convention expects to get a little bit of a lead, having 4 consecutive nights of being able to kind of broadcast their platform, their ideas, spotlight their biggest stars, and drive that message over the course of 4 days. That's a lot of saturation for the American people to digest. And again, going off of the tragic events over the weekend, that also will carry with it a likely slight polling advantage. But again, these are 2 of the most recognizable political figures in history. There's not a lot of new ground to uncover about how you feel about Donald Trump or Joe Biden. I expect it to be a neck and neck race within the error margin from here all the way to November.
Yeah, Donald Trump riding a wave of momentum right now. How might J.D. Vance as his VP pick help or hurt that?
Well, I think that this was a selection that was about exciting and invigorating your base, about setting up the next generation of MAGA and life after Trump. When you look ahead to places like 2028, he's 39, almost 40 years old. He's got a long runway ahead of him for his political career to take that MAGA flag and run with it over the next decade and a half. And I think that's really what that pick was about. That pick was about the future. So much of this election so far has been focused on both candidates being, older, maybe a little bit past their prime. And this was a selection that is about the future. And I think that's something that will be an exciting element for Republicans, something that they know when they vote for Trump, they're not just voting for Trump in 2024, but for their brand of politics going into the future with a pick like JD.
Kurt, polls have shown Vice President Kamala Harris is outperforming President Biden in some of these key states. He is trying to finally put to bed some of the concerns about his age and mental ability. Has he been successful in doing so as the focus has now shifted on Trump and the events over the weekend, or might that come back to haunt him?
I think part of that depends on if the Trump-Vance ticket gets a huge polling spike after the convention and that gap between him and Biden widens, that could reinvigorate the calls for taking a second look at the Democratic Party ticket. Biden has said in the past, he would potentially step aside if he could be convinced that there was no path to victory. That's really what it's going to take, I think, for anything to happen. But remember, we're likely to see the Democratic Party officially nominate through a virtual Zoom process the Biden-Harris ticket at the end of the month. So the window to make a change is quickly narrowing.
What are some of the other trends that you're seeing in the polling in some of these key battleground states?
Well, I think one of the interesting things is neither Biden or Trump in almost any poll ever gets above 50%. There's always a ceiling, and it's generally somewhere between 40 and 48%. And so what that tells you is, again, everybody has reinforced positions about how they feel about 2 political figures now that have been in their spotlight for the last 8 years nonstop. There's just not a lot of new ground to cover here. There's not a lot of minds to change. It's unlikely that a Trump voter is going to wake up tomorrow and vote for Joe Biden and vice versa. And so that tells you this election really is about turnout. It's about getting your side to vote, about getting as much of that 2020 vote share, one of the most highly participated in elections in history, Biden being the most, getting the most votes in history, Trump getting the second most votes in history. Whoever can get the majority of those votes to come out again in 2024, that's who's going to win.
We looked at that chart just a moment ago. Nevada, another one of those critical states. President Biden is in Las Vegas right now campaigning. He has been challenged, though, in trying to shore up support among Black and Latino voters. Why is that?
Well, I think that there's this feeling when you look at Trump and the level of strength and almost testosterone break that he shows that does actually appeal to a lot of the working middle class Black and Hispanic communities. Democrats would tell you that they don't believe the polling in this case, that they think that that's an aberration, that in their communities, there was a local mayor in Nevada saying this the other day that, the people in the Black community that he talks to, and he's one of the only Black mayors in America, they're firmly behind Joe Biden. And so that's one of those things where we'll see what comes up in polling. I always kind of question how many people this day and age are really taking 30 to 45 minutes to talk to a pollster. That's why I'm always a little skeptical of what the polls say at any point in time. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, not a good time, right? Talk to me later. I'll fill out the questionnaire at another time. Immigration safety across America will be a big focus today, day 2 of the RNC. How do you expect Republicans and the former President Trump to differentiate himself from Biden on this issue? And can he, given the focus of so much of our attention the last few days?
Yeah, I mean, I think on immigration, we've seen the Trump playbook really from 2016, which is hammer border security, talk about keeping the border secure, backing the Border Patrol, having resources for immigration enforcement. They will continue to talk about how on Biden's watch, border incursions, border altercations spiked. And that's something that they feel very strong about. They think that's a winning issue for them. I think when it comes to safety, this is kind of a back and forth thing here. Republicans will obviously talk about, they have been for a long time, law and order, crime in big cities, that feeling you don't feel as safe as you used to. Democrats will say, like, well, we're not the ones running around with AR-15 lapel pins. We're not the ones saying everyone should have a gun. And looking at the events of this weekend, I think, again, the fact that this was an attack that was carried out with an AR-15, that puts Republicans in a bit of a rhetorical bind here of how far they can really go, because the natural answer for Democrats to all of that is, well, then why don't you support an assault on a ban on assault weapons at this point, when even your own guy was the victim of a crime involving an assault weapon?
Yeah. I have just one more quick question for you. We're going to be hearing from Nikki Haley tonight. What can she do to convince her supporters to now turn their support towards Donald Trump when she was so adamant and against him in the primary?
Yeah, I mean, I think that her speech will be a lot about unity. And unlike a lot of the speakers that we have heard up to this point and we'll likely hear, she's going to have a much, I think, more softer tone. She will try to appeal to those 25% of Republican primary voters who, even after Nikki got out of the race, they still voted for her in some of these primaries. She's going to try to do everything that she can to talk about unity and why it's important to get behind the overall Republican agenda, not necessarily maybe Donald Trump the person, but the agenda that he represents.
Yeah, can she help make up some of that difference in such a tight race? Kurt, always a pleasure. Thank you.
I'll talk to you soon.
Still ahead,